Good afternoon. I'm Vice Mayor Shanika Smith, the Chair of Boards and Commissions Committee. I would like to welcome you to our September 13th remote meeting. All council committee members and staff are participating virtually. To help the audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on the Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9478. Your phone will be placed on mute and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will push *3 and enter the speaker queue. I'll now do a roll call vote to introduce the committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Hello.
Councilwoman Kim Roney.
Good afternoon.
City Attorney Brad Brenham.
Hello, everyone.
Interim Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Hello, good afternoon.
Deputy City Clerk Sarah Gross.
Hello.
Assistant Clerk Jerry Goldberg.
Good afternoon.
Okay, we'll do the approval of last month's minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
And myself, aye. The minutes have been approved. And we go on to our September board appointments. Well, let's do public comment. We do public comment first, and then we'll move on to board appointments. Is there anybody in the speaker queue?
No callers in the queue today.
Okay, we'll move on to the agenda. Then we have a vacancy for Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. There is a recommendation from the general manager. Is there a recommendation from the committee?
When you say the recommendations, are you referring to the 3 that Mark Combs recommended, or are we talking about the chair?
No, we're talking about the 3. Right now we're talking about the 1 vacancy for not for the chair, but the regular seat.
Okay, so I will say I had the opportunity to review, and I was actually quite pleased when I saw one of Mr. Combs' recommendations is a gentleman named Chapel Carter. And the reason I was pleased was I've had occasion to be acquainted with Chapel and his family for over 40 years. Haven't seen them in a minute, but I'm well aware of his background, and the portion of his application that was really pleasing to me was that he worked with Mark Combs to appoint a manager, a general manager for another location. So it looks like those 2 have been working together. So he would be my recommendation.
If that's a motion, I will second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll do a roll call vote to approve. Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
And myself. The motion carries for the recommendation. Is it Chapel or Chappelle Carter?
His name is Chapel.
So I'll be ready on tonight not to badger another name. So we'll move that forward to council for full council approval on tonight. We'll move on to the audit committee. We have 2 vacancies and they are CPA seats, but no applications were received. So we'll move on. The clerk's office will re-advertise for those seats. And I think there's going to be a concerted effort to reach out to some accountant firms. Jerry, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the 2 vacancies are the CPA seats, so there are no standing CPAs on the committee at this time. So if any of you know, I will be sending our vacancy with a nice cover letter to some of the accounting firms in the area. But if you can also share that with your networks, because we do need some CPAs on this committee. Thank you.
Heard. Thank you. We'll move on to the Historic Resources Commission. We have one vacancy there. Staff and chair submitted their recommendation for the appointment of Alexander Ellenbogen. Is there a recommendation or comments from the committee?
Well, when reviewing all the applicants, I noticed that as far as a geographic representation, that Amy Moxley had a strong application, and we don't have someone from East Asheville. So I was interested in finding out if this committee might support Amy's application.
I have no objections to that. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, with a motion and a second, I'll do a roll call vote for approval. Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
and myself, aye for the recommendation to appoint Amy Moxley. Move on to the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee. We have 3 vacancies. The chair and staff recommend reappointment of David Nash and David Bartholomew. And I think there is a recommendation also from the chair and the staff concerning the 3rd vacancy to re-advertise for the appointment of that 3rd seat. But is there
Right. So,
comment?
as the liaison to the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee, I'll just put out the reminder that we do have HUD requirements for the continuum of care. And so we're looking for representatives that represent criminal justice system, behavioral health, university faculty or staff. School district McKinney-Vento liaison I believe has already been appointed, but state or local workforce development, business association, and hospital system, especially because we recently lost our hospital system appointee. But for this moment, I would definitely recommend or make a motion to reappoint David Nash and David Bartholomew to the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee.
I'll second that.
Okay, I'll roll call. Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
and myself. And that is the motion is approved for the reappointment of David Nash and David Bartholomew, and also the re-advertisement for the 3rd vacancy. Human Relations Commission, we have 4 vacancies. And there is a recommendation to appoint Bethany Duke and Babette Freund. Any comments from the committee?
I'm not opposed to appointing people from outside of the city limits if we need to, because we have this many vacancies. But the way that I was reading it, we don't have any applicants from the city of Asheville.
And I don't think we've had any applicants from city residents in a while on a couple of our appointment decisions. So I don't know if this is a new thing that we're going to give clearance on appointing county residents. It seems like it might be a thing, but I guess I'll just ask for a second because it seems like that was a motion.
I'll second.
That was not a motion on my part. More just a concern that I know we've been having this conversation. Have we sent our openings list to groups like Leadership Asheville that are doing work with new and upcoming leaders in our community?
Yes, I believe they are on our list. We have a pretty extended list outside of just media.
Yes, we have a distribution list, and I do believe they are on there. One of the updates we hope to give to this committee is exactly like who we're distributing to, and maybe get more ideas. I think that's scheduled for after the new year. But yes, we love ideas. We're trying to reach out as much as possible.
Right, Brad?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I would note that with regard to the HRCA, this is an advisory committee somewhat different than many of the other committees in that it was formed via ordinance. And the ordinance in section, I believe, B1, I think, state that the membership must be made up of individuals from within the city. So right now, you are technically prohibited from appointing members outside of the city. Council does have authority to alter that, but you would need to take that preliminary step to amend the ordinance membership requirements first.
So I'm hearing today that we should probably re-advertise just as we would consider changing the ordinance if that was a future consideration.
I appreciate that, Brad. We'll move on. We'll re-advertise. Jerry, comment?
We do currently have one member who is not a city resident then. Can we get direction from Attorney Branham?
Let's examine that outside of the meeting, Jerry. We'll need to get some additional information and we can advise and update the council on next steps.
Thank you.
All right, I appreciate that. We're moving on to Multimodal Transportation Commission. There's one vacancy and we do have a recommendation from the chair to appoint Jack Eagleman. Is there
So
a
moved.
comment recommendation? All right, we'll roll call.
Oh, I'll second and roll call. Is that what we're doing?
All right, let's keep it moving.
Okay.
Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
myself, aye. The motion carries for appointment. Soil Erosion Stormwater Review. There are 2 vacancies, but no applications received. So we'll re-advertise. But there is a current member who is interested in reappointment. Is there a motion to reappoint that individual? I don't have their name before me.
Vice Mayor, there are actually 2, Pete Hildebrand and Catherine Roseford. Those are the 2 who are current and both are willing to serve again and have expressed their interest in continuing to serve.
I moved.
I would move. Oh, yeah. Second.
I'll do a roll call vote for those 2 appointments. Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
and myself, aye. The motion carries. Urban Forestry Commission, we have 1 vacancy, but no recommendations received. Any comments or a motion from the committee?
On my review of this as the liaison, I see a strong application from Nick Beimiller, but I wanted to name that Karen McNeil is a member of the Tree Preservation Task Force, to my understanding, at minimum has been showing up regularly to meetings. So since we need folks who are not only committed and interested, but also participating, it wouldn't be hard to move Karen from the audience seat to a seat at the table, which is why I'll make a motion to appoint Karen McNeil.
Karen McNeil,
Second.
roll call. Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
and myself, aye, for the recommendation to appoint Karen McNeil to Urban Forestry Commission. That's all for appointments today. We'll move on to, move on to a conversation about the appointment of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. But before that, Kim, you had your hand raised.
I just wanted to make sure that we had a chance to circle back to that.
Circle back to,
Chair of the ABC board.
oh yeah, we're going in order. That was the reason why I kind of mentioned it differently, because I have the mind to hold a possible interview, not full council interview, for the appointment of this the board chair for the Alcohol Beverage Control seat. I was wondering if there is a temperature for the committee to hold that at our next boards and commissions meeting. So it's not going to rise to the occasion of full council interview, but to at least have those 2 individuals come here. We present interview questions to them, as well as offer the other council member to submit questions to this board to be asked at that interview time during committee. Is there a, how do you all
I would
feel?
definitely support that. I think when I'm looking at how quickly things are changing across the country of potential new responsibilities our state ABC boards may hold, as far as inventory, it especially makes me curious about what the vision is for good business practices and relationships at the state level and among our own board, as we might have to prepare for taking on greater responsibilities.
Councilwoman Mosley, you have a sense of how you feel about either moving forward with an appointment today or waiting to the next meeting and doing some kind of formal interview with the two candidates?
I don't have a strong preference, and seeing as the two of you do, I'm happy to follow your lead, Vice Mayor.
Okay, so what we'll do on tonight, when we make this recommendation to hold interviews, we'll also offer an opportunity for other council people to submit questions. We'll ask those questions during this time in an interview process, and then we'll all have a decision on the final choice during the meeting on October. Remind me of the date, Jerry, October 11th?
October 11th, yes.
All right, that's how we'll move forward with that. We'll move on to unfinished business. We have update on remote meeting policy for advisory boards and commissions appointed by City Council. Sarah, gonna cover it?
You got it. All right. So remote meetings, this is very specific to our advisory boards, again, appointed by the City Council. So first, looking at this, I'm going to talk about the intent and purpose of this proposed policy. And then secondly, talk about what is being proposed, what's in the policy. So the intent and purpose is to continue essentially what we're already doing, providing that opportunity to have remote meetings for, again, our advisory boards. Because the state of emergency was lifted in August, that provided what we were utilizing remote meetings under, that explicit authority to hold those meetings. And now that is no longer into effect, we're looking to have something in place that would give us the authority to continue, again, as we currently are, holding some in person and some remote meetings. This proposed policy only pertains to the meetings, or I'm sorry, the members of the boards, of the advisory boards. Is not intended to limit public participation, nor will it or should it bind any kind of future advancements we're able to make for public participation. So that's kind of the intent and purpose of this proposed policy. Secondly, talking about what does it say. So first, the default would be, unless the board takes action, to revert back to in-person meetings. That would be in line with the current guidance from the North Carolina for public meetings. But this policy would give that option to hold remote meetings. But it does require that the committee commit to either meeting fully in person or fully remote for the duration of the year. The purpose behind that is to help ensure that the regular meeting schedules are properly noticed, and that way staff, board members, as well as the public know what to expect for each of these meetings. This policy also does require a supermajority vote to hold remote meetings. The logic and purpose behind that is because we do know that boards, as well as board members of the various boards, have differing opinions on how they want to hold meetings. So having the supermajority or 2/3 vote would help to ensure that the substantial majority of the board is meeting in the way that the board prefers. We also kind of want to note here that there is concern that there is a possibility for increased resignations. So just want to be mindful of that. And again, the supermajority meet how they choose. And then also on that note, I want to add there was an administrative error in that the incorrect version that did not have this 2/3 supermajority language was not posted on this agenda. It was on when we reviewed and talked about this at this committee meeting on August 23rd. That language was there. And it was fixed this morning and is currently there and highlighted and what is linked to your agenda right now. So that's the purpose and what the policy says. But I also want to note that at that August 23rd meeting, Councilwoman Roney made the request that recording or audio also be included. At this time, that language is not included in this policy, and that is mainly because of the resources and capacity to commit to requiring that. However, we are encouraging that boards who do choose to meet in person utilize that first floor conference room, because that is where we are equipped to have recordings and that we know that the audio is good there. And then lastly, I want to note that the Inclusive and Accessible Government Project was awarded ARPA funding from this council, awarded to our communications department. And that is, a lot of that money will be used to looking into hybrid options and recordings and all that fun stuff. So I do think we can anticipate that down the line. It's just not included in this remote meeting policy, which the purpose is to give us give us the continued option to hold remote meetings. So that was a lot. Any questions?
I have a couple. So the meetings that are happening in person are definitely going to be happening in the first floor conference room where we do have the equipment, but we're not clear on whether or not the record button will be pressed.
It should be. Has that been I didn't know. Has that been an issue?
Well, no, I'm just curious. I'm curious why not go ahead and move forward with the procedural expectation and the staff support, or is there a way for a member of different advisory boards to, like, say, almost like a secretarial role? I was the secretary of the transit committee for a few years to make sure that there's a audio recording and support getting an audio recording. I'm just wondering where's the gap, and we have the ARPA funds to support this kind of accessibility. But I saw Jerry had a hand up.
I think, Councilwoman Maroney, I think your question assumes all meetings are in that first floor conference room. If I'm correct in that assumption, they are not all held in that conference room. And so there's, like, for instance, some are held in the public safety building on the 4th floor, and there's no sound set up in there. In addition, the 6th floor conference room here in City Hall sometimes is used for meetings, sometimes Public Works. So the only room, and Sarah can correct me, that has the microphones for the members and also for public comment is the 1st floor conference room here. So it would take some upfitting rather, for some of the others to guarantee the quality that the sound is captured.
So I guess my curiosity is, when we were looking at this last year, a number of leaders in chairs and vice chairs of our advisory boards wrote a letter together to council asking about the archiving of meetings. And if we're not ready to, have a tripod and some sort of device that either records the audio that can go at the meeting or press play on a video, how long would it take? What's the window of time that we're imagining between being able to make our meetings fully accessible and archived? Simply because it's been a benefit to me as a council member to be listening to the planning and zoning meeting while I'm doing laundry.
And I would need to defer to the communications department on the timeline and what that looks like. I know it's definitely being, it's built into the ARPA funding. I don't have that timeline. I have connected with Dawa, the director, and hopeful that she will, at a governance or this committee meeting, get an update on that accessibility and inclusive project. So we might have a better understanding there.
So if we're just looking at like 2 months or 3 months, and it's like, we're going to have everything archived and streaming in 2 months, like, why wouldn't we just ask our advisory boards to meet virtually for 2 more months? Does that make sense? Like, we're just talking about a short window, but if we don't know, and it's like, might be a year, that's a different kind of decision to be making. Additionally, one of the comments that we got for this meeting, added to my understanding that often staff have to sit through a very long meeting to maybe speak to something at the end of the meeting when they could, in fact, simply call in. And it could be a great benefit to staff if they didn't have to sit through entire meetings in person. So I guess I wonder if we're ready to make this decision for our advisory boards. But so long as we have clarity that we're looking at the same thing with the supermajority vote, both in this meeting and for tonight, then I'm ready to support it. I just want to have more information on what we're actually asking our advisory boards to do. And if we're going to go silent on archives and streamings for just a few months because we're lacking a piece of equipment or not having enough support for staff, then we need to know that.
There is an action required, correct?
Yes, if the committee is willing to make a recommendation, that would be on full council's agenda this
What if we don't
afternoon.
make a recommendation?
would be removed from the council agenda, correct, Brad? Or well, I guess maybe not removed. It would just be noted that the committee did not make a recommendation.
Yeah, this is currently on the city council's agenda for this evening for final action. Certainly, this particular council committee can make an up or down, positive or negative recommendation, or you can choose not to vote on it at all, at which point either of those options, including taking no action at all, would be reported to the city council. I would just, as a reminder for the committee, the same thing that I will tell the council tonight if asked is one thing that is imperative here is we are a little bit time sensitive for this particular action. It is something that we have been utilizing state legislation in order to continue the remote meeting authority. That authority actually expired when the governor lifted the state of emergency last month. So we've been essentially already working on a bit of borrowed time. We may, at any given time, without action by the council this evening, need to move all boards immediately back to a full in-person format to be most compliant with state law in the absence of a policy. And right now, this isn't simply amending a policy. This is actually establishing for the first time a remote meetings policy. And we've only been able to do it to this point because we've had this interim legislation that has now expired. So we are trying to fill that void, allowing status quo as much as possible and empowering the boards to make their own decisions. But without that policy, we'll lack a great deal of the authority we need to continue remote meetings.
So what would it look like if I were to say, make a motion with an amendment that we will prioritize an archive of the meeting, whether it's video or audio?
You're absolutely free to make that as your original motion. There's no motion on the table right now, so you don't even need to amend. You can make that as your motion. And if a second occurs, you can go to a vote.
And what's staff ability to archive all meetings? Because that seems like it was an ongoing question as this very topic has come up over time.
Again, I would need to defer to the communications department and what that looks like on that end. So I can't commit to a time frame or what that looks like.
Right. That's why I said prioritize, because I think that the not having enough information on whether or not we're able to archive, but needing to have a policy in place so that we can continue virtual meetings as much as possible. Prioritizing an archive, whether it be video or audio recording, would be my motion.
Ben?
Thank you, Councilwoman Smith. So Sarah, just a quick question. If the advisory board chooses to meet in person, and of course, ones that meet virtually, obviously we'll be able to archive that as we have been. So if the advisory board chooses to meet in person, if they do that in the North Conference Room here in City Hall, then we have the ability to record that, correct?
Correct. With with the current setup, yes.
Okay, so the outliers then would only be, number one, you'd have to choose to meet in person. We don't know the number of those. Then number two is that board would then have to choose to not meet in that conference room, which obviously we would try to accommodate that board in that conference room. So,
for example, the Urban Forestry Commission meeting at Public Works, could you just bring an audio recorder, record the meeting, and put that file up with the minutes?
That can be done, but we can't assure that the audio of that would be great. But that could definitely be something.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for as a something. That's why I said prioritize.
Yeah.
I think,
we can get a something.
I think we could clearly make an effort to create records of any meeting that happens. It's hard to know without knowing exactly where everyone's going to meet, but I think the emphasis would be to try to use the room that's already set up for that capacity. And I think we could probably message that if you want to meet in person, here's the best way to do that in a transparent way, in a way that we can capture.
I think it gets to the spirit of it, just because as council members, we don't have minutes until a month later when they're approved. And then tracking down staff to figure out what happened in what meeting. It would just be so easy to say, here's the audio of that meeting.
I feel like I could support this being prioritized, but with us not knowing what devices will be used to audio and capture video, and if it's going to have the type of quality necessary for sharing, I don't think we have enough information. And I think this has been an ongoing conversation with communication over time. So when we first brought the conversation about how we were going to archive meetings when they are in person, it seems that they didn't have the staff capacity or could not commit to doing that duty because they didn't know staff capacity. But as conversations have evolved, I don't think we can guarantee great quality because we don't have the equipment necessary to have quality video and audio to send out.
I remember those conversations before the ARPA funds. I guess the expectations of the CAPE department receiving ARPA COVID-19 relief funds would be that we were doing something to improve community outreach and engagement, and that this would be falling underneath that.
Okay, I don't know that to be guaranteed, but and that it will cover. Was it ever discussed to cover committee meetings, boards and commissions meetings?
A big piece of that, if I recall, is to upfit a lot of the conference rooms to help with the public meetings or committee meetings falling into that.
Okay, is there a motion on the table?
My motion remains to adopt or to recommend the adoption of the policy with a addition of prioritizing an archive, whether it be video or audio recording.
Is there a second?
Okay, second.
All right, roll call for approval. Councilwoman Mosley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Motion carries. And we have an update on realignment. Sarah?
Yeah, so a smaller group of the current realignment working group is currently meeting, or actually, yes, from 2 to 4 today in person at that Public Works building to really dive in and work towards finalizing that proposed survey that I had mentioned in previous meetings. The idea being that this survey would go to current and past board and commission members with the effort of gathering more information so we can look at next steps. Do want to give a big thank you to Patrick Kona and the Sunshine team. At first we were unable to guarantee that we'd be able to, this is, I guess a good way to say it is we're trying a hybrid today at 2 to 4, thanks to the equipment that they're providing. So we will see how that goes, and looking forward to this survey. And I think that's
Comments from the committee?
Yeah, I would just say thank you for working with community members who've been improving access to meetings to try something like a pilot. Appreciate that.
All right, we'll move on to public comment before we adjourn.
My computer went to sleep. 1 second.
Okay.
We do not have any callers in the queue.
All right, meeting adjourned.